Wait, pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted, and you might not have noticed it yet, but somewhere out there tonight, your person sat very still in a moment they weren't prepared for. They were surrounded by people, the kind of evening where everyone's talking over each other, where laughter blurs into background noise and nothing feels like it should matter much. But then someone said your name, not in a heavy way, not in a way that demanded attention, just casually, the way people drop a name into conversation without realizing what they carrying with it. And something in your person froze. Not on the outside. On the outside, they kept their face calm, kept their hand around their glass, maybe nodded slightly. But on the inside, something they'd been quietly avoiding for weeks, maybe months, just got pulled to the surface by a stranger's honesty. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Let me tell you what actually happened, because the details matter here. It wasn't a dramatic night. It wasn't the kind of evening that announces itself. It was ordinary in the way that ordinary nights sometimes turn into the ones you remember years later. Your person had gone out, maybe with friends, maybe with people they don't even know that well, the kind of group that gets pulled together for no real reason except that nobody wanted to be alone with their thoughts that night. The lighting was warm. The music was low enough to talk over but loud enough to fill the silences. There was that low hum of conversation, glasses clinking, someone telling a story nobody was really listening to. And your person was there, half present, the way they've been a lot lately. Smiling when they were supposed to, laughing on cue. But somewhere behind their eyes, there was a thin layer of distance, that quiet kind of disconnection people develop when they've been carrying something they haven't named yet. They've been doing that for a while now, functioning, existing, going through the motions of their life with this faint hum in the background that they keep dismissing. Then it happened. A third person at the table, not someone deeply involved, not someone with an agenda, brought you up. And the way they said it was what made it land. Because they didn't say it the way your person had been telling themselves the story. They said it honestly. Maybe they said something like, "You know, she really cared about you," or, "He was good for you, and I think you knew it," or, "I always thought you two were different together." Something simple. Something true. Something your person had been avoiding hearing out loud for so long that hearing it from another mouth, a mouth they couldn't argue with, couldn't dismiss as biased, hit them in a place they thought they'd locked up. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here that's still unfolding for them right now. Their first reaction wasn't dramatic. That's the thing about real emotional moments. They rarely look like the movies. Your person didn't tear up, didn't push back from the table, didn't say anything revealing. They just got quiet. The kind of quiet that other people don't always notice, but that lives loud inside the person experiencing it. They reached for their drink, took a longer sip than usual, laughed a beat too late at whatever the next joke was. And then, slowly, almost without realizing it, they ordered another. And another after that. Not because they wanted to be drunk, but because some part of them was trying to dilute the weight of what had just been said. Because here's what hit them. The third party's words weren't really news. That's what made it so uncomfortable. They weren't being told something they didn't know. They were being told something they'd been refusing to acknowledge. There's a difference. New information you can absorb and move on. Old truth said by someone outside your own head, that's the kind of thing that lodges itself somewhere you can't reach. And this is where things quietly began to shift in them. They started doing that thing people do when they trying to stay in the present but can't. Their body was at the table, but their mind kept drifting to a conversation they had with you once. To a specific look you gave them that they dismissed at the time. To something you said in passing that they hadn't thought about in months but that suddenly felt important. Memories don't usually come back chronologically. They come back in fragments. A laugh. A texture. The way you said their name a certain way. The smell of somewhere you used to spend time together. They were sitting at this table full of people, but they were somewhere else entirely. And the strangest part? They couldn't tell you why this particular moment had cracked them open. Other people had probably said similar things before. They had their own quiet thoughts about you. They had nights where they almost reached out and didn't. So why this one? Why now? Why did hearing your name from someone else's mouth feel different than thinking it themselves? This is where understanding slowly begins. I think it's because when you carry a feeling alone for too long, you start to convince yourself it isn't real. You tell yourself you being nostalgic. You tell yourself you just lonely. You tell yourself it's the kind of feeling that fades if you ignore it long enough. But when someone outside of you, someone with no stake in the story, looks at the situation and names what they see, suddenly your private feelings have a witness. And once a feeling has a witness, you can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. That's what was happening to them at that table. The thing they been hiding from themselves had just been seen by someone else. And there's no unseeing that. They could finish their drink, they could change the subject, they could go home and try to sleep it off. But the words were already inside them now, sitting in a place no amount of distraction could reach. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. They went home that night. Maybe they walked. Maybe they took a ride. Maybe they sat in their car for a few minutes before going inside, the way people do when they not quite ready to be alone with themselves. And when they got into their space, their apartment, their room, wherever home is for them right now, they didn't immediately do anything. They just stood there for a second. The lights were off. The silence was loud in that specific way silence gets when you carrying something heavy. And in that silence, the thoughts came. Maybe I let go too quickly. The thought arrived without warning, the way real thoughts do. Not announced. Not invited. Just there, sitting in the middle of their chest like it had been waiting for permission. They tried to push it away the way they been pushing it away for a while now. But it didn't move this time. It just stayed. Why does this still feel unfinished? That was the next one. And this one was harder because it had a question buried inside it. If something is finished, you don't keep wondering about it. You don't keep flinching when someone says the name. You don't keep noticing when a song reminds you of them. You don't keep almost reaching out and stopping yourself. The fact that they kept doing those things, the fact that their body kept reacting like the door wasn't fully closed, was telling them something they hadn't wanted to hear. If this resonates, let it settle in you. You don't need to force this, just feel it. There's a song that came on later that night. Maybe it was on a playlist that just happened to shuffle to it. Maybe they put it on themselves without thinking. Either way, the moment it started, something in them tightened. Because it was one of those songs. The kind that doesn't even have to be specifically yours and theirs. Sometimes it's just a song that captures a feeling they had during a time when you were a part of their life. And the song hit different now. They listened to the whole thing. Didn't skip. Didn't change it. Just let it play, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing in particular. That's when the regret started showing up. But not the loud kind. Not the dramatic, fall to your knees kind that you see in shows. Real regret is much quieter than that. Real regret looks like a person sitting in dim light, scrolling through their phone, stopping at an old photo, and just looking at it. Not crying, not reacting, just looking. The kind of looking that happens when you trying to remember who you were when that picture was taken, and trying to figure out where that version of you went. And this is the part they still trying to understand. They started replaying conversations. Not in a healthy, organized way. In that intrusive, mid-thought way where suddenly you remember exactly what someone said to you in a specific moment and you wonder why your brain kept that particular detail. They remembered something you said once that they had brushed off at the time. Something you tried to tell them that they hadn't been ready to hear. And now, sitting in the quiet, with the third party's words still echoing somewhere in the back of their head, they finally understood what you been trying to say. That's a special kind of pain. The pain of late understanding. The pain of getting it now, when it would have mattered then. They felt that. They didn't know what to do with it. So they did what people do when they don't know what to do with their feelings. They poured another drink. Maybe lit something. Maybe just sat there in the dark. The point is, they weren't trying to feel more, they were trying to feel less. But the strange thing about emotional dams breaking is that once they crack, you can't really plug them back up. You can numb yourself temporarily, but the feeling waits. It always waits. Stay with this, because what's coming next is the part where the real shift begins. At some point in the night, they thought about reaching out to you. Not in a dramatic, sweep you off your feet way. Just a quiet thought. What would I even say, kind of thought. They might have opened their phone. They might have stared at your name in their contacts longer than they meant to. They might have started typing something and deleted it. Started typing something else. Deleted that too. They didn't know what they wanted to say because they hadn't fully figured out what they were feeling yet. They just knew something inside them was reaching toward you, and they didn't know how to translate that into words. And here's the truth about that moment. It wasn't because they suddenly missed you. They missed you for a while. They just hadn't admitted it. The third party's words at that table didn't create the feeling. The feeling was already there. The words just gave them permission to stop pretending. That's a really important distinction. Because so often we think someone has to be told something 100 times before they hear it. But sometimes, all it takes is the right voice at the right moment saying what everyone else has been too polite to say. And suddenly, the thing you've been hiding from yourself, even from yourself, comes up to meet you. What happened next was subtle, but it mattered more than they realized. They started thinking about who you actually were to them. Not the simplified version. Not the easy version where you were just someone who came and went. The real version. The complicated, layered, hard to describe version. And in thinking about who you really were, they had to face who they were when they were with you. Because you can't separate those things. You can't think about another person honestly without being honest about yourself in relation to them. And what they realized, quietly, without ceremony, was that you saw them. Not the surface version. The real version. The version they don't show many people. The version they sometimes don't even show themselves. You saw it. You knew it. And maybe at the time, that felt like too much. Maybe being seen that clearly was uncomfortable when they weren't ready to be seen. Maybe they pulled away from that intimacy because they didn't know how to hold it. Maybe they confused the discomfort of being known with a sign that something was wrong, when really it was a sign that something was true. They sitting with that now. They sitting with the possibility that they walked away from something real because they hadn't done the work yet to receive it. That's a heavy realization. It doesn't come with relief. It comes with a strange, hollow ache. Because once you see your own pattern, you can't unsee it. This is where the perspective shift happens, and it happens slowly. They started seeing you differently. Not as someone they lost. Not as someone they hurt. Just as someone who had been honest with them in a way they hadn't appreciated at the time. Someone who had given them something real and asked for nothing more than honesty in return. And they hadn't been ready to give that. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't know how. There's a difference, and that difference is where most of their guilt is sitting right now. You know what's interesting about this kind of realization? It doesn't usually come with a plan. They not sitting there mapping out what to do next. They not strategizing how to win you back. They not building a speech in their head. They just feeling the weight of what they hadn't let themselves feel. Feeling the absence they been calling space. Feeling the silence they been calling peace. And they realizing these things weren't peace. They were avoidance dressed up as peace. There's a difference, and they relearning that difference the slow way, the painful way, the way most of us learn it eventually. What's beginning to shift in them isn't a decision. It's an awareness. And awareness, once it lands, doesn't undo itself. They might not reach out tomorrow. They might not reach out next week. The timing of that is its own thing, and you can't force it, and honestly, neither can they. But something has changed in them tonight. Something quiet. Something they didn't expect. They went out for a normal evening and came back home carrying a truth they hadn't been ready to carry. And they can't put it down now. They tried. It won't go. This is where the quiet sense of meaning starts to settle in. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that announces itself. Just a soft feeling that this moment had to happen. That the third party at that table, without knowing it, without intending it, had said exactly what your person needed to hear at exactly the moment they were ready to hear it. That's the strange way truth has of finding people. Not when they looking for it. Not when they prepared. But when they sitting somewhere ordinary, doing something ordinary, and someone says something honest that they can't argue with. There's a line in scripture that comes to mind here. Not as a sermon, just as a quiet thought. The truth shall set you free. It doesn't say the truth will feel good. It doesn't say the truth will be easy. It says it will set you free. And freedom, in this context, isn't a fireworks moment. Freedom is the slow process of being honest with yourself about what you've been pretending not to know. That's what's happening to your person tonight. They being slowly, quietly set free. From the version of the story they been telling themselves. From the dismissals they been using to cope. From the comfortable distance they built between themselves and what they actually felt. And here's the thing. This isn't about you needing them to come back. This isn't about waiting by your phone. This isn't about manifesting their attention. This is about understanding that the door you thought was closed was never actually closed on their side either. They just didn't know how to walk back through it. Now they starting to. If you felt this shift too, you already understand. You might not hear from them right away. You might not hear from them in the way you imagined. But the energy between two people doesn't lie. When something shifts on one side, it shifts on both. You might find yourself thinking about them more in the coming days. You might feel a softening you hadn't expected. You might feel a strange peace where there used to be tension. That's not coincidence. That's what happens when something invisible aligns. What I want you to know is that you don't have to do anything with this information. You don't have to chase. You don't have to reach out first. You don't have to make a move. What's happening on their side is happening because it's time for it to happen, and the timing is not something you have to manage. The work is being done for you, in them, without your effort. Your only job is to keep being who you are. To keep living the life you've been building. To keep choosing yourself in the small, quiet ways you've been choosing yourself. Because that's what made you the kind of person they couldn't fully forget in the first place. That's what made the third party at that table see what they saw. That's what made the words land the way they did. You being you was the gift. You staying you is what's keeping the door open. And tonight, somewhere, your person is sitting in the quiet aftermath of a moment they didn't see coming. They're not the same as they were yesterday. They might not be able to articulate what's different. They might not even know it's permanent yet. But something in them has rearranged itself. Something in them has finally said the thing they've been refusing to say. They miss you. They know they miss you. And they know now, in a way they didn't know before, that what they had with you was something they hadn't fully appreciated until it was being described to them by someone outside the situation. That's a hard kind of clarity. But it's the kind of clarity that lasts. The kind that doesn't fade with the next morning's distractions. The kind that stays. So if you've been feeling something in the air today, a strange softness, a quiet pull, a sense that something is shifting somewhere just out of view, trust that. You're not making it up. You're not being dramatic. You're picking up on something real. The connection between two people who genuinely saw each other doesn't dissolve just because the circumstances change. It just goes underground for a while. And sometimes it comes back to the surface in moments like these. Quiet, unexpected, ordinary on the outside but earthquake-shaped on the inside. Let yourself feel that. Don't rush it. Don't reach for it. Just let it be what it is. Whatever happens from here will happen at its own pace, in its own way, and it will make sense in retrospect even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. And what they're beginning to realize now, is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.